So welcome, Lauren. Welcome back after a dark day. So you've had an amazing career singing at places like the Met and Glyndebourne, La Scala, and you're especially known for your work at New York City Opera in its heyday. What is different about performing in an intimate venue like BPAC?
Well, I got started, early in the 80s, working in out-of-the-way places on the Lower East Side with Anne Bogart specifically. And so for me, it was a conscious choice to want to get back to that, find my roots again. Mm-hmm. I turned 60 this year, and so I'm looking to do something more meaningful, that maybe is more connected with the public in a more visceral way. Mm-hmm. I love all these young composer-y type humans, and I've been loving the work they've been doing. And so, so I love this kind of venue. I think, it affords the audience a really interesting relationship with performers because they're so close to mm-hmm. us. And so, so it was something that I really was very interested in. It's very attractive to me, mm-hmm. As a place to perform.
So you've been closely associated with roles in modern and contemporary operas, works by people like Hugo Weisgall and Hindemith and Kurt Weill. And what draws you to singing that kind of repertoire?
It's funny. I mostly sang Donizetti, Rossini, Mozart, and Verdi. But the other things got so much attention, like Central Park by Deborah Drottel and Robert Beezer, or Philip Glass Symphony that he wrote for me, or, Venus and Adonis of Henze. And, those things, the Esther, the Hugo Weisgall, got so much more attention.
I remember that.
Than so many other things that I did. I think that the scale sort of tilted in a strange direction, but it's not one that I dislike. I love it, and I loved being associated with, largely American works by American composers. I was very, very close with William Balcom and Arnold Weinstein when they wrote A Wedding for me, and Robert Altman, the director, who turned the movie into an opera for me. And I loved that close association. I didn't know that I would. One of the great motivators that I had as a 20-year-old was that I wanted to be the kind of an artist that creators wanted to work with. In opera, that's unusual because back in the 80s, there weren't a lot of alive creative opportunities with living composers for singers, and it was largely career killer in the 80s when you would do American works. And so it's been kind of like this weird and yet wonderful misrelationship, One of the things that really fed it well was I kept going back to the classics, so my voice largely stayed really, really healthy through the mm-hmm. whole thing. And then it afforded me to do, crazier things like Morning Becomes Electra and take bigger risks with my voice and sing in a much bigger way than I would have, let's say, in Mozart or Donizetti. Yeah.
Right.
So, I don't know, it was fun. And
do you think that's changed now?
Oh my God, it's completely different.
Yeah.
Now, if you can't sing modern operas, you can't have a career.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It was a
difference.
Complete career killer in the 80s.
Yeah.
You became totally sidelined as kind of a specialist in something. And as a matter of fact, in every theater where I made a debut singing a modern opera, I was never asked to sing one of the classics. It's absolutely true.
So
City Opera is the only exception to the rule because even though I made my debut as Musetta in La Bohème, the next big piece I did was Esther. Mm-hmm. And yet they had me back to do, Macbeth and Roberto Devereux and,
right.
Die Todesstadt. So I got a chance in that theater to, really do an incredible repertoire. But at the Lyric Opera, I was a modern opera singer.
Was that great Frank Corsaro, Todesstadt?
Yes, at City Opera.
with all
yes.
those wonderful
Slides.
the
Film.
projections.
Yeah,
and-
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
amazing production.
Yeah, way ahead of its time.
So, in another way, Words on the Street is a return to your roots. In
Kind
that,
of.
in that.
Yeah, in that way, it's it's definitely a kind of a walk back into, working hand in hand with people who have new ideas, want to synthesize different elements and make theater out of all those elements, like video and sound design. And I have a neurological disorder, and I didn't know if I would be able to be in an environment that was filled with all these sounds and, in our case, screaming and coughing, and, it's like, and drone sounds. And there was a huge learning curve in it for me as well, because it's a medium that I didn't come through. It's a real modern construct right now, that all these elements of making music, which is really what Matt Marks was all about, are now like involved in, almost every opera now.
How's the modern voice different now than what we called the modern voice 30 years ago?
Well, hopefully it's not different. Hopefully people are able to circumnavigate from Don Giovanni to, let's say, Dog Days by David Little, or to, Morny. I think the Metropolitan Opera largely is kind of banking on the fact that, someone as terrific as Isabel Leonard can move equally between, I think she did Zerlina and Don Giovanni like a season ago. She was amazing. And then move into this, modern repertoire with the same beautiful sound and the same approach to, classic music making. So I'm hoping it's the same. It better be the same.
Yeah, seeing it in a couple of weeks.
It needs to be the same. Yeah, exactly.
So you've been doing work lately in the nonprofit sphere as well. You founded, yeah, all right.
There we go.
So we have the real backstage atmosphere here,
We do,
right?
because we're actually backstage.
We are in the green room, which is green,
Which is weirdly green.
unlike most green rooms.
Yes, exactly.
So you've been doing some work in the nonprofit sphere recently. You founded Music and Mentoring House, whose mission is mentoring through an example of leadership, musical opportunity, education, and community service. So tell us a little bit about that organization.
So 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with sudden sensorineural hearing loss, active Meniere's disease, and a couple of other weird things, all associated with the fact that the hair died in my cochlea. And the phone literally stopped ringing like the next day, literally stopped ringing the next day. And I needed something to do. I had been teaching acting to opera singers because I had studied acting my entire career, actively in class all the time. And there was a joke that they would say, well, we'll stay up here and read your books and we'll study, and you can just go back down there and we won't make noise. And it was getting harder and harder to get them to leave my house. And there was this thing happening in the back of my head where I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to have a residence where kids could come, largely kids from 18 and up, who either want my coaching on their repertoire, or they need to use my library, or they need advice, career advice. And so I had this amazing opportunity to be in a workshop at the New York Foundation for the Arts, and during this workshop period, I came up with this idea. I found a house to rent, and in the 8 years that we've been doing this, there's been like about 240 some odd kids through my program. Last year I started actively pursuing becoming a life coach and getting certified, so that, because there's ethics involved in all of this, and I was very kind of moved by, really how that changes my commitment to giving advice and being smarter. And so I added that now to, what I'm able to do I invite my friends over. We have this thing called No Bullshit Mondays, where friends that I know will tell the truth, that are famous opera singers, come over and have dinner, and I do all the cooking, and they tell the truth. And it's sort of like a what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas scenario, where what is said at the table stays with them as private information. They talk about what it's like to be a married couple and be on the road, or why women shouldn't listen to the popular opinion, which is if you're a performer, you can't be married or have a child, and just live your life. And so we talk about a lot of really interesting nitty-gritty things. A really great friend of mine, Peter Cazares, came and talked about sexual harassment on the workplace. And he absolutely laid it out. And he said, it absolutely happens. You absolutely need to have an eye out for this. And so, I'm trying to find things that are active, real things that they can take away and use the next day.
The kinds of things they don't get in grad school.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to fill in that space for them. It's $50 a day. You get 3 squares and a bed.
Wow.
And I'm there, so, which is good and bad for me personally, because, I can't go to the bathroom without someone wanting me to solve their problems, so, or get a cup of coffee,
Right.
which is really more like it. I exist on coffee. And so, but it's a terrific place right now. I live in the oldest house in Harlem on East 128th Street. It's a 156-year-old wooden house with a slate roof. It's a beautiful residence. And I have a full-time student there who's in the School for American Ballet, and I just had opera singers there. Our colleague Sumaya Ali, who's in our show, Words on the Street, she has been staying with me. So it's worked out. It's become like a place for performers to gather when they need advice and information, and just really kind of what I wanted.
It's good to know about.
Yeah.
So it's Monday. What's for dinner?
Well, everyone's kind of on their own this week because I'm on the clock now as a performer.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of an interesting tie-in because I turned 60 this year, and I thought, okay, I don't want them to think that there's this finite period of time that you're a singer. Also, with a disability, fighting my way back in to perform in some way. I've really almost no desire to sing in big opera houses anymore. I really am kind of firmly attached to this idea of small theater, affordable opera, smaller ideas, really intimate ideas and intimate connections. And so, we will, that's sort of where I'm going with this. So, yeah.
So here we are backstage for part 2. I welcome back Lauren Flanigan, singer and actress in Words on the Street at Baruch Performing Arts Center. And we were just talking a bit about your music and mentoring house.
Right.
And now I believe, I want to check if I have this right, this is your first appearance in a fully staged music theater production in about 7 years. Is that true?
In New York.
Uh-huh.
In New York. I did Morning Becomes Electra in 2013 with Florida Grand Opera. Marvin David Levy called me and asked me if he knew I had, had an issue that involved my ability to match pitch and various other things, because I have permanent vertigo, so I have a severe balance disorder.
Wow.
Stage largely makes sense to me, so.
Right.
But everything that happens in any given show is built into my performance. So, like, if a lighting instrument makes noise, for instance, because a fan is cooling it off, that's built into my performance. Like, I notice that and say it to myself so that it's not a sound that takes me by surprise. Mm-hmm. And then I did a production of Tosca in El Paso, Texas, for a dear friend who was running the theater company, the opera company at the time. I also was wondering if that was a role that I would like singing, mm-hmm. and I enjoyed singing it. Vici d'arte, not my aria necessarily, but the rest of it was like really a lot of fun. And I feel like there's not a wasted note in that opera, and mm-hmm. like it's in that way it was such a worthwhile thing to learn it. But this is the first time I've done any public performances in New York beyond, I think I did like a Macbeth aria for New York City Opera before it absolutely closed its doors.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's it feel like to be returning to New York?
Well, this is baby steps. I mean, it's super interesting. Matt was a wonderful, quirky, geniusy kind of guy, and we had fun on Twitter and on Instagram. We both have golden doodles. Unfortunately, my dog passed away in June, and so we knew each other because we were posting golden doodle posts on Instagram, and also I followed him on Twitter, and he really was like the master of short phrases on Twitter and turning language on its head. So I was really curious. I'd met him a couple of times, and I sort of developed this line that I threw at Joan LaBarbera, and it kind of worked on her, where I said, if you're looking for a neurologically impaired, formerly great soprano who will work cheap, I'm available, And so she took me up on it immediately, and she wrote me the next day after I met her, and we're actually working on a project we'll be doing next year. And so I decided to try it out on Matt. And also my friend is Anna Rabinowitz, who's the writer of this project.
Right.
And we've known each other for a number of years. And she's just a very serious, deep thinking poet, and who loves language. And this piece kind of mourns the loss of language, as it does so many other things in the piece. And so I was kind of compelled to try it. I adore Kristen Martin. I mean, she's just very special human. I love the Prototype Festival, and Here Arts and Beth Morrison Projects was such a huge part of that. And there was just so many elements to this project that I thought, might really work out well for me to try out something. And Kristen was just very open to understanding my disability and how they could be helpful in the process. And basically pretty much is I just have to know what sounds I'm going to be hearing, and then build those into my show. And then I'm pretty much on my feet and I don't fall over, which is always good.
That is good.
Unless you're supposed to fall over.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I mean, I wouldn't know you had a disability without hearing about it.
I mean, you do off stage. It's pretty obvious off stage, but on stage, reliably, 40 years on my feet on stage, I have some kind of wonderful instinct for how that goes. There's nothing that's left to chance, though, now. There's no moment of any kind of improvisatory idea, because I really am thinking, now here come the coin drops and you go stage right, and now he says this and there's gunfire, and that's literally
Right.
what's going through my head the whole time in the show. So.
Do you think about pitch?
No,
in a
I
different
can't
way, or-
think about pitch. I actually used it. It's funny because my ENT says I kind of invented my own biofeedback. For a long time I was trying to vocalize sharp by using a pitch monitor, like the kind that the oboe players use to tune the orchestra. I just found it maddening because, being sort of glued to this needle on a screen on my phone that didn't take into consideration vibrato. So I went to the great soprano Diana Soviero and I said, I have this problem. And she said, we'll figure it out. So she started showing me a reliable series of exercises that allowed me to really feel the vibrations in the front of my face. And so now I don't drop any vibrations, literally, I would say below my top teeth, the bottom end of my cheekbone. Everything is in this much higher position until I scream a lot in this, not with my voice, with my speaking voice.
Right.
that I dropped down, and I'm not afraid of that.
Mm-hmm.
But the singing part, I don't really pay attention to. I rely on the musical director to tell me that it's absolutely what they want,
Mm-hmm.
and then I just memorize what that is and keep it going.
Right.
There's a little bit of like wiggle room, where you can reinterpret something or hold something a little bit longer. But so that's kind of been nice. But I went from, at the worst, I was probably in the realm of less than 30% accurate, like in the very beginning. My diagnosis, it was like a snowball. I started falling over a lot, and when I was in a room with lots of ambient noise, I couldn't understand conversation at all. And I really thought I had like a brain tumor, I was going mad. And then it kept getting worse and worse and worse until I also have this very strange thing where sound that happens in a room that I can't identify, it's like it goes on a loop in my head, and my brain replays that sound over and over and over again. And it could do it for 5 minutes or 5 months. It doesn't discriminate. It has no length. Yeah. And I used to do this thing where I would put noise canceling headphones on and lay down and try to, in quiet, identify the sound, and then just persuade my brain that's what it was. And very often it would let go of the noise. But
it's like
in this
resolving
yeah.
a cadence or something.
It's interesting. My service animal, Seamus, so he would lead me down the street, and so he was so good at it that I could just literally walk down the street and go, oh, that's a school bus. Those are children. That's an ice cream truck. Oh, they're drilling in the street. Oh, here comes a city bus, because, they have that compressed brake sound that lets out air. So I became more and more mobile, because I was able to get out more and do more, which has also raised my confidence level considerably, which is another factor that contributed greatly to getting me here.
Right.
Equally to Kristen's, absolute, and Matt's, when we did the workshop last year, Matt was, and he's crazy, in the middle of a workshop, he would just say, sing this note. You sing that note. And I'm like, oh, wait, I don't know. What note is it? And he was like, yeah, you're great. Keep doing that. And all of those small things just combined to kind of raise my self-confidence. It's funny to think that I had lost all my self-confidence, but I pretty much had, and then when my service animal died, when Shamie died in June, Kristen got in touch with me immediately, and Anna, and they were like, what are you going to do? Because he was my way on the train, and he was my way in the world. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to, it's a trust exercise. I'm just going to rely on you guys. You understand what the problem is, and we'll just deal with it as it comes up.
Well, so less improvisation on stage, more in life.
I mean, in opera, largely you don't improvise, but the more you sing something, the larger the spaces feel between the notes. So, like, for instance, in the bel canto, that's what starts to give you this, like, freedom to really do wonderfully crazy things. There's also that slight freedom, between you and the conductor to sort of like hold something longer, or do like a crescendo, decrescendo, or, come off of it a little bit later than usual. There's that, in classical music, there's the amount of what you would call improvisation is infinitesimal. It's almost immeasurable, but it feels huge to us. Because we're so measured and married,
right?
And so that little tiny thing can sort of exist, but I really want to. This is still such a huge learning curve for me, in that, we have gunfire in our show, and coins dropping, and the sounds of drones, like actual drones, and we have drone tones as well. So largely I'm pretty much like sticking to the script and just trying to just absolutely fun. And I do some crazy dancing in this show too.
Yes,
so
you do.
I'm literally just trying to hold on to what dignity I have left.
Yeah, I had no idea you could tap dance.
Yeah, nobody did. We were in that number once, and every time we got to that number, we kept thinking, that's the sound of the shop who's fixing our set.
Yes, it is.
As we're talking.
Let's see if we can dull them a little.
Ted's trying to shut the door as we speak.
I am shutting a door. All right, there we go.
So what were we just talking about?
Tap dancing.
Tap dancing, right. So we were always, every time we got to this number, which is like, there's like this vaudeville breakout in the middle of our show. And I kept thinking, what did she do? Like, I play Pride. So like, you know, what's in her arsenal of things that, you know, she had in her life. And I had been using this sort of through line that Pride had a baby that died, and that Pride's whole reason for existing now was to corrupt anything that was new and innocent in its search for its own, to find its lost child. And I really was working hard on that because there is a baby in the show and all this. I was,
Right.
you know, and then one day we were doing something and I thought, oh, no. I'm John Benet Ramsey. This is Toddlers and Tiaras. No, it's true. And I thought, that's what the posing is all about. That's what because pride is the only sin that has a good side and a bad side.
Right. So
So one should
all
have-
the characters in the opera, so we fill our listeners in, are the seven deadly
Yeah,
sins.
we're all the sins.
Right.
But lust is the only sin that needs people, and pride is the only sin that has a good side, you know, to have pride in one's work or pride in one's,
Right.
you know, education or one's singing voice. But then pride taken to an extreme, and I thought, oh, what's that moment of like being this child superstar, but then having it stolen away and just being locked in this moment. So that you're largely like stuck in time. And so what were your skills? Well, that's why you have these rudimentary but pretty accomplished tap steps that you can do. And these routines that were familiar to you as a child. And so I've gone in that direction. I don't mean Jean Benet Ramsey like specifically, but
Right.
I mean that idea. That's like sort of a name that the public can like really glom onto and understand. But like Toddlers and Tiaras, that thing
Right.
of like having taken pride in this thing, and the makeup and the hair and the clothing, and my clothing is a little elaborate. And
Yes, it
yeah,
is.
you know what I mean? And so that started to take hold, like, oh, child superstar, but that it never evolves past that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, you answered my next question. How you prepared for Pride? Do you have a favorite sin?
Do I have a favorite sin? Oh, I don't know. I mean, in our show, I love all the sins equally. I mean, it's been interesting to like live inside, you know, the sins in this way where we're recasting them. We're taking them outside of the parable that Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill set up, where we're really kind of imagining them in a 21st century context and what it means in a 21st century context. It's actually given me a lot more to think about in terms of, you know, anger. Like anger's been something to really, you know, Caitlin's just a beautiful young child. And, you know, she's like a gorgeous, adorable 20-year-old. And yet, you know, that voice can really bring out a side and of anger. And, you know, it gives you a lot. It gives you a lot to think about.
It's like your current project is in a dialogue with Weill's Seven Deadly Sins, which was another role for you at City Opera.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I mean, that was also a really interesting, you know, we did it with Anne Bogart's City Company. And so we knew we were not going to take this typical line through it that she's dancing and I'm only singing, and to explore like what it means for two girls and to set out in the world. You know, and I think about that a lot. You know, I run this house and I have young women and young men who come into my house, and I think about this every day. This summer, I was confronted with, you know, young women who wanted to come forward with their stories of sexual harassment in a musical environment, and how was I going to talk to them? And And I looked back now, like in some of these rehearsals, and I thought, oh, we really talked a lot about anger this summer, and we talked a lot about envy. And, envy comes up a lot when you are coaching young people who want what everyone else has, especially in this world where it's all about the beautiful posts on Instagram and
Right.
Snapchat and what do those things mean? The thing I think that really sat with me, though, was this whole issue of anger and what is anger and how is anger expressed and why is it expressed and when is it appropriate to express it and why is it hard for us to handle other people's anger?
Yeah.
It's so hard
It's very
for us.
socially forbidden.
Yeah. Raise your voice, people immediately, it's too much for them. It's too much
Right.
emotion for them. It's too real or something. And so it's been fascinating to kind of like look at this and recontextualize this. And Anna wrote this before the 2016 election.
Right.
Yeah. She wrote this before that. I mean, she was envisioning, and she says in a couple of interviews that she had been grappling with the 7 deadly sins as she saw this turn away from morality in our society and ethics. And like, had we forgotten about them? And
Archetypes come from somewhere.
and it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing.
So what do you think, I mean, in a way, we've just talked about what people might find important in words in the street, and what might they find fun about words in the street?
Well, there is humor in this, and so there's a lot of fun. Also, Matt's ideal, which I think was so beautifully expressed in an interview you might have done with Mary, Matt's fiance, was that Matt was very interested in how tuneful music could deliver a serious message. How you could get audiences to hum along with you, but they were really humming something that was subversive or that was, kind of evil, even in fact. And so there is humor in that. It's interesting, it's a work in progress. I think they would like to add more to it and develop it a little bit further, which would be really a lot of fun. So I think people should look at it as an idea that's still in process. As these are certainly not all of the poems that Anna had in her book. And so it's funny because, my colleague Sumaya's daughter came and she thought this opera was dark and twisted.
Uh-huh.
But for all the right reasons. Her assessment of what was wrong was really spot on. And I thought, wow, if anybody walks away even asking themselves one of the questions that she was grappling with, having looked at it, then we're headed in the right direction. It should provoke conversation. So far, I think I've had a few people come, or maybe about 15 people have come, and so far it's provoked some pretty interesting conversation. Yeah.
So Words on the Street plays October 29th and 30th and November 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. You have 5 more chances.
Yes.
Do not miss them. And
it's a fantastic hour.
It's indeed.
It is 1 hour long. It's absolutely virtuosic.
Jam-packed.
And it's very virtuosic. I mean, Paul Pinto is in it. He was in The Great Comet, and he's an amazing composer. He wrote Thomas Paine and Violence, and Sumaya Ali was also in The Great Comet, and she's a terrific vocalist, and Caitlin Sisko, Broadway veteran, even in her very young years, and Paul On, who sings in the Trinity Choir and does a lot with Prototype and a lot with, different new music groups, and Adrian Rosas. I mean, these guys are are
What a varied
Yeah.
menagerie of talents.
Yeah, they're very virtuosic, and I know I'm in the cast, so it sounds like. But I didn't know them before I didn't know anybody except John Kelly, of course.
Right.
Oh, and John Kelly, holy cow! You know,
Yeah.
my God, I were downtown. People come see John Kelly. That's your
Absolutely.
reason.
Yeah.
That's worth a $30 ticket right there. Just John Kelly, you
Yeah.
know. But I mean, I have to change I did know John. John and I've known each other for like 25 or 30 years. We've known each other a long time.
And if those are not reasons enough,
Yeah.
come and see Lauren Flanigan.
Oh, yes, please. Support
soprano,
old people.
Actress. And thank you for listening. Thank you.
Hey,
Hello, hello, hello.